is the Doing Diversity in Writing podcast, the show where we as authors explore the better practices of writing inclusively, whether that be in terms of race, gender, ethnicity, class, sexuality, ability, and so on. Why are we here? To bring more depth and breadth to the characters in our fiction and represent them in the best way possible. My name is Bethany A. Tucker, and with me each week is my co-host, Mariëlle S. Smith. Ready? Let's dive in. Hey Mariëlle, how are you doing?
Hey Bethany, I'm okay. I know this episode isn't launching until like the end of January, I think, but it's the 13th of December as we record this. We're super on it, just to get some things out of the way before the holidays start, and I'm super psyched. So my energy might be a bit palpable because I'm still in the middle of my book launch. It launched 52 Weeks of Writing. It launched 2 weeks ago. It's being really well received. I'm in the middle of the book tour, the virtual book tour, and that's also been going really great thus far. And another reason why I'm psyched today is, because of the book launch, I stepped away from the office a little bit for the past 2 months because that needed all my attention. But I'm back in the office and I've started editing a dissertation earlier today, and the topic is just really, I love it. It's on same-sex desire and gender nonconformity in the Dutch Caribbean. And the researcher looks at it through the lens of race, gender, sexuality, Dutch colonialism, imperialism, slavery, and so that's right up my alley, and I'm really happy to be back at work. So I'm a bit, even though it's 9 p.m. here, I'm quite psyched today. How are you?
I mean, that sounds perfectly up your alley. I'm doing well. I'm thinking forward to when this episode will air, and I will be heavily into Unchosen too. So right now, just getting through the holidays, came back from traveling and planning the new year, which I always just take a lot of time in December and plan the new year and think about what I want and don't want to do. But that's over now by the time everyone hears this. So in real time, when everyone's hearing this, I will probably just be writing my heart out.
Which is good because I cannot wait until that book is done.
Yes, I can hear people snapping lips already. The last review is like, so I need the new book yesterday. And I'm like, it takes a while to write these babies. They're huge.
Yes,
so,
yeah.
So today we have our first interviewee, and you are going to introduce him for us.
Yes, I am. So today we have with us Antoine Bandele. I'm sure I've tried that a million times. I'm sure I did it wrong anyway. He's an Amazon bestselling author in action adventure fantasy, dark fantasy, sword and sorcery, African American fantasy, and African literature. He was born and raised in Los Angeles, though he spent 1 year in Fort Lewis near Tacoma, Washington, while his father served in the US Army. Antoine lives in Los Angeles with his girlfriend and cat, super cute cat, by the way. And you can find him producing videos all over YouTube, including his own channel. And his bio on his website says, which you should totally check out, and you totally should, because Bethany has become a total fan in the meantime. And Antoine is just really fun to look at and listen to. And Antoine is also an audiobook engineer. He is the author of the young adult fantasy series TJ Young the Orishas, the adult fantasy series The Sky Pirate Chronicles, the Lost Tales of Esowon, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong as well, the Kishi, and more. Antoine, welcome.
Oh, thank you. And I believe every single pronunciation you did was correct. So no mind. And also big compliment from you about the kitty, because I know you have like cats for days. So to say that mine's very, very cute it's huge.
I think that my current foster cat looks very much like your cat.
Oh, I mean, yeah, he's I don't know what kind of cat, because I know everybody's like, what's your breed of cat? And I was like, I do not know. A cat.
It's a tabby. It's a tabby cat.
Oh,
you have a tabby cat.
There it is.
Yeah.
Mariëlle is definitely the authority on cats around here, and Theo, her little foster right now, is absolutely adorable and probably hates all of us for making her put him in the other room right now.
Yeah. And his full name is actually Theodulos, because I'm trying to give them Greek names, which Arvad always laughs at. But yeah, so he's short as Theo. But he does look a lot like your cat, Antoine. I'll send a picture after we're done recording.
Okay, cool.
So thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me, for real. I'm happy to speak and talk about all of these things that we're going to speak and talk about today.
Yes.
Very much so. I think I have the first question. So
yes.
We're in season 2 of our podcast, which is where we're helping and supporting writers in exploring writing diversity, specifically in terms of racial identity. But as we interview people, we want them to feel very comfortable to talk about any of the identities that come up, because writing is very much a broad spectrum activity. We can't pigeonhole ourselves as writers. So our first question today is, what are some of the identity markers that you would identify with?
Well, first and foremost would be Antoine. And I think that's really important to identify first, because we are our own person first. And I think sometimes that gets lost within the representation commentary sometimes, is that, we're all individual people. But of course, there are features of us as individuals. For me in particular, I'm a Black American. Specifically, I say Black American in particular because African American tends to be used and thrown around similar to Asian American or like Latin American as like a subset of American, because for instance, in 2019, I went to Japan. People saw me. They're like, "Oh, you're American." I'm like, "Wow, that's actually the first time anyone's really called me straight up American without having to put like oh no, you're a subset of America. You're an African American or anything like that." And something similar that or something that I don't see as often with the UK, where you see British people just being denoted as British without any kind of tag on there. So my identity marker would be Antoine first, but then American second, and then you can do like Black American like as a third.
I very much appreciate that, and I also resonate with what you said about being in Japan. My husband is Black and American, and when we lived there, and he lived there before I moved there with him, he was just American, except for the fact that he didn't like chocolate or beer. So they questioned his identity based on that. But he was just American, and it was a very different experience than what he and I had experienced traveling and being in America before that.
Oh, and apologies, I should clarify too. So the reason I say that about the not being a huge fan of like Asian, African, or Latin American, especially when you're in America and you're an American, is because we don't seem to have that same sort of thing for if someone is British American, or if they're some sort of European American. You don't hear that tag as much. Maybe with yeah exactly, maybe with like Italian you had a little bit of that, like especially in like the early 20th century, but then that kind of went away and they kind of got molded in there. But I would be okay with it so long as that sort of language was used throughout every single, quote unquote subgroup in America. But really, I always prefer just American, because I think that's the way forward for me personally. That's my mentality, is that there was a famous interview that, oh my God, forgetting his name because I'm on an interview and I'm blanking because that always happens. Morgan Freeman, someone asked like an interview, like what was his philosophy on racism? Like, how do we end it? He's like, stop talking about it. Like just be people, and then that is the best way to do it. And that's the way I remember growing up, just being like, well, I'm just Antoine. Like, I don't want to, as like a primary, I don't want to be seen as like, whatever, color I am or culture. Like, I'd rather just be, hey, just introduce yourself to me as a person, don't prejudge based on, what kind of a perception you might have of people who look like me, kind of a thing. But then there's the reality of, that is just the world we live in, and people, often do that, and how to navigate between that, especially within fiction, which I know we're going to talk about, later on. But how do you write to make it known what your character is? Because there's also the other side of the argument, which is you don't want to, as I'm doing another quote unquote, whitewash your characters in that like they don't have any sort of identity marker. But then at the same time, it's like, well, you still want to make that person just a person and not like just, whatever their outward facing identity might be. And so it's a hard thing, right? To do all of that, like make a person, but also don't like erase their background.
Exactly.
They're very difficult.
Yeah, it's a bit of a balancing act, right? Because and we've talked about this in the first season as well, is that we don't want it to be necessary to mark certain characters, right? With the identity markers that they have, right? To show the diversity. We don't really want that to be a necessary thing. But if you don't mark anybody in any way, the default is like what you said, right? It's like whitewashing. People will assume that you're talking about a white character. And that for me actually leads back to what you were saying before, is that you would not have a problem with having like Afro-American and Asian American if we also had Irish American, Italian American, Scottish American, whatever, Polish American,
French American. I hardly ever hear French American ever.
But the thing is, everybody who is white, right, gets away with being just American.
Right. Exactly.
And that's kind of the same. It's the same thing. It's like they're not marked, so they must be white. Or they're seen like, because you talked about the Italians, and of course, Jewish people used to be seen as Black people, the same for the Irish, but that's, throughout history that changed. And now they can be they can get away with just being American.
Right. And just to say that there's a great artist that I listened to all throughout my college years. His name's Childish Gambino. You might know him as Donald Glover, the actor and writer.
I know him.
Yeah, so his first album, which is awesome, I remember he came, because I used to work at the Apple retail store, and he was just in there buying like an iPhone case, because I remember he was like a big iPhone fan or whatever. And I was just like, thank you for like, doing this album. It was just very honest. And one of those reasons, because he has a line in one of his songs, and it's called Hold You Down. But the line goes, white kids get to wear whatever hat they want. When it comes to Black kids, one size fits all. And I like that hit so hard for me, because I was just like, wow, like that's just like exactly the way that I grew up. You were put in certain boxes because of the outward facing identity, but then you're like, but I'm much more than that. And then you have these other kids who can just kind of they can do everything, because they're not subjected to one stereotype.
Yeah, but that's I think what we also why we're doing this podcast, because like in this ideal world, this podcast would not be necessary,
right?
And we want to move, like what you said, like we want to move towards a future in which, when somebody is not marked, people in their minds will just fill in anything they want, and that can be as diverse as they can have it, right? But we're not there yet, so how do we get there?
And it's starting to happen. Like, I don't know if you've been following animation like Dragon Prince or Arcane that recently came out on Netflix, but they have extremely diverse casts, which they're diverse, but they don't ever say like, oh, I am this character or that character. And also helps because they're in fantasy settings too, and that might be the way, right? Like fantasy works. But or you're seeing that a lot with like a lot of new Star Wars properties as well, where people are represented but not pandered to.
And I think doing that on screen is a little bit different than doing it on the page.
Correct.
One of the things I've found is I write diverse casts in my books, but I'll get feedback for readers, even readers that aren't necessarily white themselves, where they are assuming everyone in my book is white. And I'm like, if you read it carefully, they're not. But to make sure that people see the cast the way I intended them to be seen, and then there's the argument of letting people see what they want to see in your work, I have to focus a little bit more carefully versus on screen.
And that's the other side of the coin, which I was referring to earlier, where it's like, oh man, you don't want to just keep seeming like you're pandering, but at the same time, you do have to make it very clear, because like I said, in today's society that we're in, like you kind of have to do that. For instance, that was a great example from Hunger Games, when we're talking about like from book to movie, where people thought Rue was white, even though it was very clear, or at least maybe it's more clear for non-white readers to identify when an author create some sort of representation, because for us, we're always like, oh, we're gonna latch onto like that one line that's in that one chapter when that character was introduced, and then that's stuck in our brain. But for like a white reader, they'll just kind of read over that and be like, what? I didn't read that part, you know. And you're like, oh no, that totally was there. Same with Katniss, you know, Katniss being an olive tone woman, seems like that they're kind of, or the Suzanne Collins was referring to her being like possibly in Latin American, and then, you know, the casting being different, or, you know, when Rue was casted in that movie, a lot of white readers were like, hey, isn't she supposed to be white? Because Katniss kept referring to her as her sister the entire time. And it's like, and that's the thing, it's like, yes, because they can have the same personality without having the same, you know, skin tone or whatever. And, you know, so yeah, it's a weird balancing act because of, you know, the readers that are out there, the perceptions that are out there, and you kind of having to reiterate certain things that you shouldn't have to reiterate.
Yeah, I love the fact that you have art in your books. I opened up some of your books earlier today. I love the fact, Antoine, that you have just beautiful art all over your books, because I feel that really helps with bringing the visual in and just helping people really connect with your characters.
Yeah, no, I really am a big fan of art. In art in books in particular, especially because, you know, I do young adult, but even in my adult books, I have art as well. Not anything crazy, you know. Usually it's just like a character in the back, or like in the divides of the act breaks in the book. But I'm really big fan of that.
Yeah, but even like on the because you're talking about your adult fantasy, so I'm like, I have the paperback of your first Sky Pirate book, and that's just like the front is just like, because your main character is a woman in the, in the series.
You can.
So you're just like, there's a black pirate woman on the front. Done.
Yeah, right? You can't make that mistake at that point. No.
Yeah. So that is, I think that is very helpful. But yeah, I mean, I agree with Bethany. Like some of your artwork, and you always share this on your Instagram as well, and on Facebook, and I love it. Yeah. Yeah. I was just gonna say, before I want to move on to the next one, because I think we need to move on, is that what you're just talking about. I remember this whole debate when J.K. Rowling had that latest, it came out as a book, but it was a play, and suddenly the Hermione was played by a black woman, and people were affronted. And then other people were like, well, have you read the description of Hermione in the first book? She could really be black.
I mean, it can be open. I mean, I think it was later found that like there were expressions in there where it was described as her skin being pale when she was scared, stuff like that. But you could say pale in terms of like, you know, like paler than what her, you know, natural skin tone is.
Yeah.
But then the thing about that I thought was cool is that, yeah, like these characters, especially characters that aren't like marked by, you know, any kind of like racial marker in the stories, like can be anything. You know, maybe like they don't have to be like a one certain thing.
No, but I think I'm so surprised that people get so upset over, especially when it's so open.
Right. I know that was a big thing with Peter Parker, going back to Donald Glover again. Like once on Twitter, he just like randomly said, oh, it'd be cool if there's like a black Spider-Man. I mean, that's actually how the Miles Morales character got created. Where he was just like, it'd just be cool. And I remember I had a big debate with like a lot of geek friends who were like, no, he has to be white. But I'm like, nothing about Peter Parker, nothing about his story. Like, because it's different if you're doing something like Black Panther. Like Black Panther is like an African Wakandan. Yes. Like, yeah, he has to be black, right? There's certain characters where, yes, identity markers are like integral. Like it's embedded into their foundations. But when they're not, like a Peter Parker, like Peter Parker is just a kid from Queens. Like it literally can be anybody. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's where I think true. I mean, like, I think we're very, very far away from that sort of thing where, you know, people will be accepting of that. But like, that's where true diversity and acceptance is when you can have like certain characters who don't have like a specific historical or, you know, any sort of identity marker, can be whatever. Like you can just, you know, cast them whatever you want them to be.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a world I want to work towards. But what Bethany said, it is more difficult in writing, which doesn't direct. I need to go. I was going to try a subtle way into the next question, but I'm failing, so I'm just going to ask it. Are there any stereotypes or tropes that you find particularly annoying or harmful? And that could be around Black American representations, but basically anything. Like, because I have tropes or stereotypes that I find harmful that have nothing to do with me personally, but I still cringe at them. So is there anything that you find particularly problematic?
Probably, but like it's usually stuff that comes up in the moment, nothing that I like latch onto or hold on to all that often. And also, like I was saying before, well, maybe in books, yeah, in particular, I would like to see, but that's the issue. Because the thing, okay, so I have this big issue with wanting to see more representation, but then when I do see it, it does feel like pandering. But it's not like a specific stereotype. I would say it's just more of kind of, especially with Black characters in particular. It's like, oh, the author has to show that they have their Black card by like saying such and such character loves Black cultural thing, like insert Black cultural thing, and then they have to do that like every few paragraphs or every chapter or so. And I don't know yet what that true balance is. So what I typically do, I guess, in my own writing is that I just write characters normally. And I guess it helps for me because I like live in a Black experience. And I myself identify first as a person, or, as American first. And then, all the other stuff comes into it. So that when I do slip certain things in, for example, if I talk about CP time, like that's something that most people wouldn't really know much about, but like if I slip things like that in, that's just like natural occurrence that just happens. I think that's the best way to do it versus like, having a big sign that says, hey, look, Black character here.
I'm going to say something really Black now.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Waving a sign around.
But I think that's kind of part of it. Like that's part of the I guess the transition period into getting into like this balanced state is that you kind of just have the pendulum swings have to go each way. Like that seems to be the way that I guess humanity operates. I guess especially like now, like social media, like very huge dichotomies that we have these days. It seems that you have to swing in one direction crazy and then swing the other way direction and be like, all right, cool. Where's the middle now? Versus just looking for the middle at the beginning. That seems to be the case.
Yeah, and that's I would wonder whether we can do that, just be in the middle.
But then people think if you're in the middle, then they think you're not like representing enough. You know what I mean? Like it's hard.
Yeah, but we do have this sort of collective unconsciousness, this sort of like tendency to see anything that's unmarked as the norm. So I do think we have to be bombarded with other representations that are constructive and actually representative and actually representations that people like identifying with. I think we need a lot of those to sort of balance the scales, and then hopefully we can get to this moment where we don't need to describe people's skin tones or what have you in or sexualities, whatever like identity markers we're talking about. But yeah, like you said, like I love how you use the pendulum, right? Because I do think we're swinging the other direction, and I think we have a bit of swinging to go before we can find that balance.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's just a natural way that it's just going to have to be like that pendulum swing just has to happen that way.
Yeah, you're reminding me of how excited my husband got when the Spider-Man movie with the
Miles Morales.
Yes, thank you.
Into the Spider-Verse. I think you were.
Yeah, the movie has a seizure warning on it, so I can't see it. But I made him tell me about it. Oh, it does go kind of
crazy. That's true.
I really want to see it because I love Spider-Man in all the renditions. I've seen like every other movie of Spider-Man, but there was a lot of excitement in the community among him, our friend groups.
That was one I think that did really good of being subtle with it, because there's time, because he's an Afro-Latino, so he actually has a Puerto Rican mother and a Black father, and it's just small stuff like at the beginning of that movie they have like the kitchen getting ready for school, and then he's like speaking a little bit of Spanish to his mom, and then having his little time with his dad, and it's just a natural morning with this family, and then you like insert the natural things that would just come up with that specific family unit versus it being like a whole I mean, there's certain, I don't want to like name certain movies, but there's certain movie franchises that will just like make it known, like, oh, this is the brown and black family, but it was just like, no, this is just a family. And this just happens to be like the way they interact with each other.
Just letting people be people. I think something that we talked about a lot in our first season was you're going to avoid a lot of problems if you allow all of your characters to be characters and individuals naturally.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like really, like the better the background, like the more well-rounded they are, the more you avoid falling into traps like, you ticked black and you ticked gay of your diversity, so your novel is good, like you have a pass. If you actually go beyond these things and actually create, and I think we've discussed it as well in the last episode of season 1 when we had some reader questions, and like we said, the thing is that what you tend to see people do is make the identity marker or the issues people might have around the identity marker really big within their character arc. And while that is sometimes the case, and some things are like, let's not erase struggles, but you can, like what you do keep saying, like you're Antoine first, then you're American, and then you're Black American. It would be nice if people wrote their diverse characters in that same way. That's the order.
Right.
Yeah. So this, I'm going to go ahead and ask the next question because I think it rolls really nicely. Could you tell us a little bit more about why you write the characters that you write in your work? Because you seem to have a broad spread, and what brings them up for you and why do you write them?
Well, the first book I did was the Kishi. And the reason I did that one is because I had watched season 6 of Game of Thrones. And I just literally looked up on Google, like, oh, African Game of Thrones, does that exist? I didn't, but I found a lot of other great Black fantasy works from like Nnedi Okorafor or N.K. Jemisin 5th season in particular. But they weren't exactly books that like I was looking for. And that seems to be the common thread for writers is, you write the book that doesn't exist because you would like to read it. That's what I did. And then my brother, he is really into Dungeons and Dragons. And he says, oh, there's just like a little footnote about this character called a Kishi, supposed to be from somewhere in Africa. And I did like a whole research on it. And the Kishi was not in any story, period. So I was like, oh, cool. I would like to read a book about a Kishi. And it did not exist at all. And even though it's about a charmer, like it's like a vampiric like creature where you have a charming man in the front, and then he has a hyena on the back of his head that, he charms you and then eats you. And I was like, oh, wow. And then to the point where, and if he likes the person that he's pursuing the most, he impregnates them. And then the demon child comes out of the womb. And I was like, wait, time out. Like, this doesn't exist anywhere. Like, absolutely no one's ever said, oh, this sounds like an interesting story. And no, it didn't. So then I wrote it myself for that reason. And then going forward, I had a pirate character in that work, which evolved into the Sky Pirate stuff. And then I wanted to do something contemporary because I was having a hard time with some of my older stuff writing certain things. So like, oh, I can't write that phrasing, it's too modern, or I can't write that wouldn't have existed then. So in going into TJ Young and the Orishas, that was a much easier voice for me. And then even my proofreader was like, you were so confident in this work. And I was like, yeah, because I can actually talk about basketball or like Dragon Ball Z in the middle of it, and that is like the trajectory of how I got into it. So first was just like a interest in this African folklore, evolving that into like, the Sky Pirate thing, and then wanting to do contemporary and doing something that was more akin to like Percy Jackson and Harry Potter.
I haven't come across, I've just started TJ Young, the first book. And I've passed the basketball, of course, but I haven't come across the Dragon Ball Z reference yet.
Oh, that's when he gets the camp, because he's a nerdy kid, and he gets close with another character based on his nerdiness.
Well, that's how introverts do it.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Introverts and nerds. I mean, you just listed off most of my friend group.
I wonder whether there's a correlation.
Possibly. I don't know. Possibly.
Have you reached that sweet place where you've written out your entire story? It's a wonderful feeling. You've worked so hard for this, spent so many long hours at the keyboard or talking to yourself via recorder, then going over it again at the computer. It's been mostly internal work, and it's often been alone. But now, it's time to take it from rough to polished, and for that, outside perspective is essential. Let me help you. As a developmental editor, I, Bethany A. Tucker, will take your hand, sort through your draft, answer your questions, and help you polish it until your work shines. You don't have to do this alone. It doesn't matter if this is your first book or your 10th book, whether you've published this book already and want to make it better, or you're teetering on the edge, eager to publish for the first time. Together, we can take your book to the next level. Contact me via links in the show notes or at theartandscienceofwords@gmail.com to take the next step. I think it's so amazing that the Kishi, like this character, this legend or mythological creature you described, it sounds like there's so many avenues and so much that could be explored, and that no one had written it yet is kind of mind-blowing.
Yeah, very, very much so. Like I was like, what, really? Like there's no story. Like I really went deep into Google, like looking for it. I was like, there's nothing in here.
Where did you end up doing your research and being able to get research on something that's like not talked about so much?
So I went really broad when I started. So I think this was like in 2016. Yeah, 2016. I read a world history book that just looked at Africa, the continent. And then I started going smaller and smaller to the point where I went to Angola, and then I went to the, I believe it was the Kimbundu peoples, who believe in the Kishi mythology. And then, just diving deep into that research. And yeah, so it's books you have to find usually in libraries, because if you find some of these books, like I think there's one called like African Religions and Traditions or something like that, and it's like $400 or something like that. And I was like, oh wait, but it's in my library, so let me just go there, kind of a thing. So yeah, just a lot of books with research. Google, using that first to just identify where these resources are, and then like seeking those out, like I was saying, via library.
Yeah, I used to work in a library, and people forget that your local university libraries can ask for resources from around the world as well.
Mm-hmm.
So like I always tell people, go make friends and walk into any library and ask. The worst they can do is tell you no, and most of the time they're really excited by a question they haven't gotten before.
Yeah,
yes,
no, very much so.
Well, even if they cannot get you the book in the end, they will almost die trying. Like any good librarian will just go for it. So yeah.
Do you have
really
library?
Sorry.
Do you have favorite libraries in LA?
Well, I mean, we're really lucky because we're Los Angeles. So like the Los Angeles Public Library is, I think, second only to the one in New York, if I'm not mistaken. So like it's a huge, like if you've ever been there, it's like floors upon floors upon floors of just books and resources. But yeah, I think it's much more difficult if you're like, in a smaller town or something, or more rural. I'm lucky because I live in an urban city.
That happens. There is interlibrary loan though. So as long as you're able to wait, which is hard in this age, but if you can wait, they can get any book from anywhere in the state. Or if you go through university libraries, it's usually anywhere in your country. I don't know what it's like in Europe, but
it's well, on a smaller scale, obviously, because most European countries are smaller than any US state.
Right.
Well, maybe not all of them, but general. Like I'm from the Netherlands, right? So it's like if you want to cross the country diagonally, it's like 4 or 5 hours, maybe by car. So that's just it. So yeah, we do have. My mom volunteers at like I grew up, like the library is at the end of my street as I grew up. My mom still lives in the same house, and she volunteers at the library. And yeah, it's like really regionally. Like in the province, I think you can get any book, and I think for a fee you can get any book in the country. As long as it's part, like there's always like hierarchies and there's like networks. As long as it's part of a particular network, you can definitely get your hand on a book.
And I tell that to people all the time. Sometimes they're like, "Oh man, like where can I get the book for free?" And they're always like, really, they're asking me like, "Oh, how do I get it legally for free?" I'm like, "Just go to your local library, and then we still get paid."
Are libraries free in the US?
Yes, they're free in the US for the readers, not for the library themselves. Like they have to buy, whatever.
Yeah, but I mean, like you don't get library cards, like you don't have to pay an annual fee.
No, yeah, it's free. No, it's free, completely free. Well, at least in Los Angeles. I don't know about other states because each state in the United States has their own like individual laws and things like that. But no, in California, yes, libraries are completely free.
I've lived in quite a few states in the US, and public regional libraries are usually free. You may have to pay like $2 for a card in some cases.
Yeah, that's the only thing I think you have to pay for is the card itself. And that's usually to pay for like the physical, whatever material they're using for the card.
Yeah.
Not for getting books or anything. There's no payment in that regard. Like I have a library card right now, but I do the digital one now because, the pandemic kind of like opened that up with the Libby app. And yeah, like I just use my standard Los Angeles library card. And yeah, I pay nothing to order these books.
Many places only charge you that card charge if you lose your card and they have to give you a second one. But the first one is typically free as well.
Yeah, very much free. It's government funded. So yeah.
I'm just like,
well, okay, hold on. I should say it. I guess we are paying for it just via our taxes. So there you go. Because really, there's no such thing as a free lunch. But
no, but I'm just shocked that like Bethany and I was comparing like health service and all that kind of stuff, like in the Netherlands, even Cyprus, right? And the taxes in the Netherlands are much higher, like even compared to Cyprus. And I'm not saying that we pay a huge deal, right? Like we pay like 40 euros a year to be a member of the library, right? So it's not like anything crazy. And if you are, depending on your income, I think you can get it for free. But it depends kind of on your status. I'm just surprised that something is cheaper in the US. I'm
but
just
you
really
get
excited.
Healthcare.
I would definitely want to switch that up. I would rather have healthcare than free books.
And then pay $40 a year to get books, right? I mean, that's reasonable. No, but it's great. It's exciting because libraries are like lifesavers. Like, I mean, my library saved my life, I think.
Oh, you saying that's actually reminds me of something because I'm playing a game right now called Persona 5 Royal, and it takes place in Tokyo, Japan. And part of it's like a slice of life game, partially, and also like a dungeon crawler. But in it, I remember the character had to pay like an annual fee to rent. Was he reading books or reading movies? I can't remember what it was, but he was basically like paying an annual fee. And I was like, oh, I wonder if that's like a thing in Japan because I can't tell like what is the video game and what is like actual Japan culture. And then, but you saying that, I was like, oh wait, I think that's the thing in Japan too. I think they also pay like an annual fee.
Yeah, but as long as it's not too crazy, right? Like for years, I was a member of the library. I never actually went to the library anymore because like I did everything online. And they never, like I read a lot of English books, surprise, surprise. They don't offer a lot, but I just stayed a member to support them. Anyway, so that's but libraries, okay.
I'm gonna push us along to the next question.
Yeah, I know. We're just summing this up. Libraries are awesome and good for you, America.
Yes, utilize them more.
Yeah. Okay.
Libraries actually get funding based on foot traffic and checkout rates. So if you check things out and show up your library, it puts pressure on local governments to actually fund them, just so people know.
Take that advice. So you talked a little bit about that already when you talked about your research for the Kishi, but I was wondering because I know some of your work and you do write pretty diverse characters, both in terms of race, ethnicity, gender, sexuality, ability.
Oh, I'm glad you said that too, because that's important as well. But sorry, I think you have more questions, so go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, this was my introduction to my question. So the question would be, what are some of the challenges that came up and come up for you while you write these characters? And how do you deal with them? And just leading back to what you said earlier about the song that, that for every Black person, like the same cap fits, right?
Right, exactly.
You don't like that's not how you write your characters.
No, and that's huge. So, and I think that helps that the majority of my cast. Oh, sorry, I think you have more questions.
No, that was it. So I'm wondering, like, how did you do that? Because they're not all like you're not writing yourself, basically, right? You're writing
Right.
completely diverse set of characters. So what are the challenges that came up and are coming up for you? Because even TJ Young is not you.
No, he's not me. He's not definitely not me. He's much taller. He's definitely more snarky and witty than I am. But no, that's a huge thing. I think it is actually easier for me to represent diversity within the Black community because a majority of the characters are Black in that story, in most of my stories. And that's a huge thing that you'll hear from a lot of Black Americans is that, hey, we're not a monolith. Like we're all very different.
Yes.
Like especially like Black nerds in particular. Like we've been existing. We've been out here, but you didn't really hear about it much until like maybe like the early 2000s, like mid 2000s, because like another thing that Don Glover said in one of his stand-ups, he's like, it was illegal to be a Black nerd until like 2003 or something like that. So yes, so I wanted to represent like even the main character. So I have TJ. He is technically Nigerian American because his mother is Nigerian and his father is a Black American. Manny Manuela Martinez, she's representing the Latina American character. She is Brazilian American, but still very much Black. Like, and that's the thing. Sometimes people, when they hear Latin American, they're like, "Oh, you mean like a brown person, or maybe like a slightly light skinned kind of person?" But it's like, no, that there's a lot, especially in Brazil in particular. I believe the majority of their population is actually Black, but you don't really see that in their media all that often, because again, not again, but like to say the slave trade was yes. most prevalent there. America gets a lot of the representation there, but really it was South America that was doing the majority of that.
Well, just don't forget who ruled South America at the time.
That was the Portuguese, right? Or I mean, well, yeah. Spanish and Portuguese.
Yes,
and Spanish and Portuguese.
Yeah, and they were also like the Dutch and the French. They were huge slave traders.
They have Haiti. That's where France was. Yeah, it was pretty significant, yeah. And people kind of forget that there's a large population of those people there. But then whenever you hear about that subset, you're like, oh, it's just brown people or slightly lighter skinned people. And then of course we have Ayo, who's in the book as well. He is straight up just a Nigerian who just happens to be in the States in that book for the camp that the magic camp he's in. But in doing that, and even with my other characters too, like I have a Yolanda Graves, I have a Dubois in there. Like there's so many different kinds of flavors of Black people that you can get in your day to day, and that was extremely important for me to represent in the book because of the idea of like the one size fits all mantra, which I never was a fan of, especially because when you're living in it, you're like, no, it's not like that at all. Like like that's not how it is to be among the Black community. We aren't just like these. The people that you see possibly like on television or whatever. So it wasn't really a challenge for me, I would say. It was more excitement because I could actually do it. Because I do see that more of a challenge if maybe I was doing a story where not the majority of the characters were Black, because then you have you have this huge weight on that one Black character's shoulder because like, oh, everything they're doing, let's see what they're doing, because that's going to be representation of what this entire community of people are. It's a little bit easier when you have a bunch of Black and brown characters in your work, and you can represent them diversely in their personalities in the same way you would with any other group.
Yeah,
I really like that.
Yeah, that's a great answer.
Spreading it out among multiple characters.
Mm-hmm,
well, not even spreading it out, because I mean it was just naturally what you were writing and naturally the set of people.
Yeah, just naturally people with. that I knew growing up or interact with in my adult life. It was literally just, oh, let me just.
You blanked out for like 2 seconds.
Oh yes, I just got a notification that says your internet connection is unstable.
Excellent. Well, we might cut that or not. What were you saying? So it was easier for me to do it because I was just pulling from my life, whether in growing up or when just my adult life, because I'm like, oh, that's like my grandmother, that is like my second grade friend, like it was easy to do because it's like, oh, I finally can like represent these people diversely because it's majority, like the cast is majority Black and brown. Yeah, I guess I do. I'm really curious because Sala in your first Sky Pirate book, I was really curious why you chose her as your main POV character.
That's just because I had wrote about a guy, and it was like a more typical guy because he was like this warrior class, and he was just like always a rager, and he's trying to like fight against his rage. I was like, I'd like to, just switch it up, and have, in particular with Zala, because that was a huge thing too when I was like designing the cover. People were like, "Oh, is that a man?" And I was like, "No, it's a woman with short hair because women can have short hair." And like, I wanted her to have her naps and curls. I didn't want her to have like this perm or whatever. But yeah, I wanted to make sure that I had a character, yeah, who happened to be a woman, but like, and a Black woman at that. And also, again, like I was saying earlier, it seems to be easier to do that in fantasy, because it's a fantasy world kind of a situation. But with her story in particular, like for instance, there's two gay characters in the work that are sort of the antithesis of what we most times you think of the stereotype with like the flamboyant sort of thing. They're both like would be considered like the strong men or whatever, like strong pirate guys, like the ones who are like the brutes who fight for you, but they're also like lovers. And I wanted to do that as well, like keeping all of that in focus rather than just, again, there's a huge thing that George R. R. Martin said. I think one of his interviews, the writer of A Song of Ice and Fire, someone in an interview asked him like, "Oh, why is it that you wrote?" I think they were asking specifically for gay characters in particular, but this could be for anything. And he's like, "Oh, well, because they exist." And I always like his writing because he doesn't. He's probably the best representation I feel for what I would want to see, in that he just writes what exists rather than going out of his way to like say, this person is this thing. It's more of like more of an observation of life in way he writes prose rather than a commentary or like an agenda or anything like that. He just kind of is like, oh no, I'm just writing like, like as if he is just someone looking into like his little playhouse and this is just what's happening versus like him, going in and inserting paint into, his playhouse. I'm actually glad I remember that because yeah, he's like probably the perfect representation of what I would like to see in prose fiction with that regard.
So before we went on this recording, I was telling Bethany exactly about that you have these two gay characters. But it's very like at one point you just you just realize that they're lovers and you're like, okay. And it's like nobody cares.
And I make no big hoopla about it. It's just
it's really just if you read too fast, like you're not like, and I was just telling her that I was like, that's how it's done. Because like we're like because they are there.
Yeah, they're there. You don't have to
it's just a reality, right?
Point and look. It's just like, oh no, yeah, okay, yeah, cool. They went off and they enjoyed each other that night. Like that's all you need. You need to know.
Yes, I remember that scene. Yeah. Hey Bethany, I think what like Antoine is leading us really well into the next question by what he just said about George R. R. Martin.
Yeah, so you just gave us George R. R. Martin, but could you name do you have any other authors or do you want to expound on him a little bit more? People that you think do diversity well in their writings, and do you have any specific works in mind?
Claudia Gray will be another one. Right now she's most known for being a writer for Star Wars fiction ever since the Disney Inquisition. In particular, was it Lost Stars? I can't remember which book it was. It was either Lost Stars or Bloodline, where it was very similar. Like there's representation in there, but it's not like a big point. And look at the thing I did. I'm putting in here. It was just like just exist and then move on. Just like you would with any other character. Like if it was for instance, if what we were speaking about before with the gay pirates, if it was a straight thing, that's what I try to do. Just write this as if they were straight characters. And then just move on, just in the same way. Like that's what I want to see from books. That's how I write them. So yeah, Claudia Gray would be another one. I would say yeah, George R. R. Martin. Who's another one? What was her name? Brittany Morris would be another one. Oh man, I can't remember. We'll keep it to those three.
Okay.
Brittany Moore, Claudia Gray, and George R. R. Martin.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wrote them down.
So did I actually.
Yeah. No, but I really like that's exactly
Oh, sorry, I lied.
whole...
One more.
Oh, go ahead. Go great.
Chuck Wendig. He's also really good at that too. All right, sorry.
Chuck Wendig.
Yeah, no, I really like what you said there. It's like this whole, so this is a thing. Yeah, and I think it's interesting because I think a lot of people might not. And I don't know if that has anything to do with us being on our phones all day these days, but I sometimes feel that people are not observing the world the way we do, or maybe observing has always been the job of the writer. I don't know. But it's like, if you really look at the world, there's so much more diversity than you think there is.
Mm-hmm.
But you just have to look.
Not even in the more, I guess, like, I don't want to say, like, quote unquote popular stereotypes or whatever, like, the big stuff, like, oh, Black people or gay people, but even just in like someone you might like, for instance, I just started playing softball in 2019. Like, I started doing like rec leagues, adult leagues, stuff like that. Recently we had someone come on our team and he was from Carolina, and I kind of did like the reverse, where he had like, this big beard. He kind of looks like a redneck, which in America, rednecks are kind of like the hillbilly type of people in America. And so that first time I saw him, I remember me and my dad saying this because he was coming into our team. We're like, oh my God, I really hope this guy is like not racist or prejudiced in any kind of way. And that was us not knowing him, and then as being on the team with him and getting to know him, he's absolutely not that guy at all. Like, and it was just really awesome to have that. And also just to remember, like, just because of the way someone looks, just on the other end of it, you shouldn't be making prejudgments until you actually get to know them. And that's what I like most about me playing recreational sports, because it helps a lot in that you're meeting a lot of different people, competing with them, and then seeing these personalities in this way that you don't typically see.
Yeah, and this is something that, and we talked about this before on the podcast as well, is that recognizing the humanity in the other.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Empathy is so important, I think.
Yeah, and it's because once you do that, right, it will also, I think this is a great way to become a better writer as well, just to have that openness to other people. And like you said, like you found a way to just automatically connect to different people, and you have something that you have in common. Well, exactly. Maybe if you'd run into this guy at some birthday party, you would have like given him a wide berth because you're like, oh fuck no. But now you're kind of in this situation, you're kind of forced to, connect, and then you realize, oh, wait a second. Oh, he's not that guy that I had in mind.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's like the movie. Remember the Titans, the one with Denzel Washington. I think it came out in like 98 or 99.
Yeah,
it was basically that. Yeah, where it was a school that was being integrated. I don't remember what, 50s, 60s, 70s. I can't remember what time period it was. But it was like, Black students and the white students having to be on the same football team, and then being on that team together made them like, push through barriers and then becoming best friends and things like that. Certain teammates being best friends who would have never, even engaged in a friendship.
Yeah, I see that's... Yeah, go ahead.
This is why I jokingly say when sometimes people ask me how to become a better writer, I'm like, go take a basket weaving class, because that's like something people make fun of in America sometimes. Like, oh, you took a basket weaving class in college? And I'm like, go do it, because you'll meet people. You'll be forced to be with people. And a lot of writers, we end up in our same social circles and we don't go out. And then we're like, how do we write these people? And I'm like, well, maybe get out, walk away from your desk.
Yeah, but I see what I was going to say is that I see those questions sometimes in like writer groups, that they are like, I want to write this person, and I'm like, but they write about these characters, or these potential characters, and these people that they're supposed to represent, as if they're like a different breed.
Right, exactly. We
like,
have way more in common than we have differences.
Yes, and I was comparing it in the last episode of season 1, is that people seem to have, like, when you write about cops and you have you don't know any cops, what you do is you ask a cop maybe about this character that you're writing, like, or is this scene realistic? But for some reason, when we talk about big identity markers like race or sexuality or gender, I think it would be, people would be less hesitant to ask somebody of a different sex, to ask, how do you feel? Maybe if the other person is transgender, because that's kind of, that's an identity marker with quite a bit of tension. And it kind of feels that suddenly, because we talk about these kind of things like race, ethnicity, gender, sexuality, ability, suddenly we're afraid to ask people, how do you feel about this? I'm trying to do this. But if somebody is a cop or a butcher or a priest, there isn't that sort of threshold to just go and ask them, hey.
Yeah, no, indeed. Yeah, very much so.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna ask one follow-up question to something we asked earlier. Your characters, they go to different places. So these are actually, were these all places your characters went? Did you visit them all yourself physically, or how did you do the research for off-site, quote unquote?
So that's much harder to do for the Kishi and Sky Pirate Chronicles because Sky Pirates and demon people. So
I bet.
So with those, like for instance, like I said before, I did a lot of independent research with the Kishi, like looking at a lot of African history, looking at a lot of videos of like the types of areas those would be in. I don't necessarily think you have to go to certain places to represent them well. However, I do think you should get feedback from those people. Like for instance, in my first book, for my first TJ book, which is much more important because it's a contemporary modern day. So there's a lot more, connections to real world things. So there's a lot of Yoruba in it, which is one of the Nigerian languages. So, you just go online and you start asking around, or if you have personal friends. I had friends who spoke Yoruba, and I was like, hey, can you read this over, make sure my accent marks are right, make sure these phrasings make sense, because usually my first pass is just like a light Google Translate, and I'm like, this placeholder, and then I'm like, okay, well, later on let's highlight all of these and make sure that they're done correctly, which is what I did. I had a gentleman who went through every single piece of Yoruba and like helped me so much with like those accent markers, because they're very, very specific. Or anything like cultural based, because I've never been in Louisiana. Oh no, I actually have been in Louisiana actually, so no, I'm lying on that part. I've been in Louisiana, but only like for a day, or like a few hours really. So you get readers who are from that area and make sure that stuff is represented correctly. For my second book, it takes place in Nigeria, so I have like a lot of Nigerian readers who are helping me out. Like there's, for even some the smallest thing as like, there's no such thing as like middle school and high school in Nigeria. They do junior secondary school and senior secondary school. So even small stuff like that, and they don't, and or even smaller than that. So like they don't even call it that. Like if you're a kid going to school, you call it JS1 or JS2 or SS1, SS2, like the way that we would say like fourth grade, sixth grade, seventh grade, eighth grade, ninth grade. So even getting small little cultural things like that is literally just designed by having conversations, as you guys are saying, like interviews and conversations with actual people who live in those areas.
I love it. It's the same way. I taught English in Japan, China, and Korea, and every place has their own system. And if you don't talk to someone about it, you don't even think to look it up.
Mm-hmm.
No, I have that in my own work, that it's based on it's based loosely on the British system. But I did not go to school in England or in Scotland, so I had to ask my friend who actually, because my main character has been homeschooled for most part. So I had to ask my friend. I have a friend who homeschooled her son for the majority of his school going year. So I had to ask her, how does it work? Like, what are your choices? What are the things you need to do? Like when he's 16, what does he do then? Because it just works different in every country. So yeah, those are the things you really have to attend to, actually. Because it's not all the same.
A question that I see coming up from people trying to do this is, how do you find readers from these regions? So how were you able to have readers from Nigeria or Louisiana, etc.?
The internet is an amazing place. So for instance, here's one story, like a specific story that so it's an actionable one. So I knew that I was going to be doing like Nigerian school system. So what I literally did is I went to YouTube and I did a Nigerian school vlog or something like that. I think I did something that would show me videos of a vlog of a student who, I was wondering, oh, well, there's people who vlog in, America all the time. I'm pretty sure there's something I can find from Nigeria. And then when I did that, I found someone like immediately, and that's how I found out about like stuff like the terminology of JS1 for like junior secondary school year one. And then I found her on Instagram because she had her Instagram tags on all her videos, and I was like, hey, would you like to read my story to make sure like I'm getting all that stuff right? And she agreed, and and we've interacted so much to the point where I actually named a character after her. So like it's just going out and legit finding that stuff.
That's awesome. That's really awesome.
I love that. So you gave us some pointers already in the whole interview, but I wanted to know, is there anything else you would give as advice to anyone who wants to write more diverse character, like what to think about, what not to do?
Yeah, just like literally, I think it's really just sensitivity readers, or going out and talking to the person of that community. For example, I have a storyline that's coming up that has to do with a character coming out. So I spoke to literally, oh man, it had to be a dozen of my friends who are of that community. And because I had a specific storyline that's going to be tied to it, because it was a very interesting story that I heard from one of my friends, but I wasn't sure if that was like and that too, like when people do journalism or research, there's the idea of cross-referencing and things like that, because sometimes if you just get like one type of story and you just represent that totally, then you have that same issue again of like making that a monolith or getting it wrong, because one person's individual story might not be representative of like what the collective might have. So when I did that, I the story that he had, I presented that to these others, and they were like, oh yeah, no, that's very much something that happens like quite often. And I was like, all right, cool. So I know that storyline that I'm doing like actually has some basis, and that is one of those things that are like a collective sort of experience that happens in coming out or figuring out one's sexuality. Versus if I kind of like, just went off that one story and then that was just like that person's individual thing, then that might not have been like the best. But yeah, it's just always cross-referencing, speaking to not just one, but many, and kind of giving like because you'll even get different ideas. Like if you talk to someone from America or from any country and you ask them what their country is like or what they like about it, what they don't like. Even when we were talking about the state systems, right? When we were talking about California library systems and other states, like it could be different, and that's why you want to get a diverse opinion within the diverse group.
I love it. I totally love every bit of that. It's so on point.
Yeah, but it's good. Like it's great advice that because I do think that sometimes in the fear, like I said, like there is a lot of fear around writing diverse characters. So there's also a fear of asking people. And I think it's partly because we're like, oh, but they're a different community. And maybe also embarrassing that you have to ask. But like I said, like if you write about a cop, nobody's embarrassed that they don't know anything about being a cop. It's just not the career they chose. And so if you don't have a particular identity marker, that's not really your fault. So if you want to write about that, you have to ask about it. And I'm wondering whether that fear and that embarrassment makes us go like, okay, I'll just check it with one person. And if they say it's go, it's a go. I'm like, no, take it easy. Like, actually invest and sort of check it with, like, I love the cross-referencing, like check it with multiple people and see if it's just this individual story, which can still work, right? Or whether more people from the same community have a similar experience.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I'm gonna do my my time cop job and remind everyone we're coming up. We've just clicked over to an hour, and I know we all have places we need to be later today. So any last thoughts before Antoine, I ask you where people can find you and what you want to point people at?
Oh, sorry, you were asking me, correct?
Yeah. Any last thoughts before we start wrapping up?
I guess just the final thought is really just to have more conversations with people, because yeah, you'll find a lot. And I mean, from people that you might not typically speak to, just in general. I think it's always just a good idea just to have a diverse friend group. And when I say diverse, I don't mean diverse in identity markers necessarily, but even just personality types or occupations.
Yeah.
All of that really helps to make you a more round person, or just even a writer specifically. Like when typically sometimes they'll go to writers will go to a coffee shop, and just listen into all those conversations, or be on public transit listening to all the conversations. Those are really important, I think. But beyond just eavesdropping, also go ahead and talk to some of those people as well.
I love it. I have been totally guilty of sitting in coffee shops and listening to people, partially because my hearing's so good they don't think I can hear them.
I think we're all guilty of that. But I think that's what we do best.
Yeah. No, go out, meet more people, and actually talk to them and listen. Definitely listen.
Yeah, don't forget the listening part.
All right. Antoine, thank you so much for being here today. Where can people find you, and where would you like to point people? Are there any books you would like to mention, etc.?
So the best place to find me is just to go to AntoineBandele.com. So AntoineBandele.com. And that's where you'll find literally everything. You'll find the books, the social media, the audiobook services, all of that. And right now, TJ Young and the Orishas is the big one right now. Like there's a lot of stuff going like behind the scenes with that currently right now, and it's like my main focus for sure. So like that one is the main one to look at.
Yeah, awesome. And I like we kind of got that, like we stalked you a little bit, and that was very obvious. But yeah, make sense. So that's, and we will definitely put a link to your website in the show notes, of course, so people can find you. And like if they're struggling, I know a lot of people are struggling with their audiobooks. Antoine is your person to go to.
Yeah, we have now 19 talent that we work with now.
Oh wow,
that's excellent. That's really good.
Awesome.
Okay, thank you so much for doing this with us.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you guys for having me. Everyone have a wonderful day.
You too. Thank you for joining us. Music for this show was written and produced by Eric Mills. If you found this episode helpful, please rate and review on your favorite podcast app and spread the word so other writers can find us too. To get our Doing Diversity in Writing Toolkit, which includes all bonus material from Season 1, go to representationmatters.art. That's .art. Here you will also find our episode show notes. Happy writing, and see you next episode!